Coming up on Network Africa, Amnesty International indicts security forces in Burundi of systematic killings of dozens of people in the capital, Bujumbura. Burkina Faso government issues an international arrest warrant for ousted leader Blaise Compaoré in connection with the murder of former President Thomas Sankara nearly 30 years ago. And President Buhari vows to recover stolen funds from Nigeria no matter how long it takes.
We will pursue the recovery of everything that belongs to the people of Nigeria.
Hello and welcome to Network Africa. I am Adeshewa Josh. It's no longer news that the political turbulence in Burundi has claimed the lives of hundreds of civilians. What's news, however, is that many of them are believed to have been killed systematically by Burundi security forces. Amnesty International is indicting the Burundi government forces of complicity in the massive killings seen across the capital, Bujumbura, on December the 11th, 2015. The rights group says that some of the scores of people who died during the single bloodiest day of Burundi's escalating crisis were killed extrajudicially. The government itself, Burundi, has not yet responded to the Amnesty report.
Over 400 people killed and escalating violence in what the United Nations has called a campaign of repression. Burundi faces its worst political crisis as the international community warns of impending civil war. Burundi, whose crisis pits supporters of Nkurunziza against those opposed to his serving another term in office, rejected the criticism of its security forces. Analysts have warned about the lingering crisis, voicing fears that the army, which was restructured after the civil war to include both professional troops and rebel fighters, might fracture, igniting a broader conflict.
The longer it lasts, the more you have the possibility of having an entrenched conflict where resources are becoming more and more matched. The army, we are not quite sure the extent to which it remains a united force, but we know that there's been a lot of reshuffling of key posts in the military that made it easier for the government to then have an armed force that responds to its imperative, particularly from the executive.
Many in Burundi said last week's violence was the worst yet. The latest attacks led to the outpouring of support, with vigils held across the world for the victims. In Nairobi, students at the Catholic University held a vigil in solidarity with their Burundian schoolmates.
I want to encourage all my fellow students that we take this up because it is the time for the youth to stand up, and it's actually the time for the youth to stand up and be able to talk, be able to speak, be able to share what is happening back in their country.
The African Union authorized sending 5,000 peacekeepers to Burundi to protect civilians caught up in the crisis, for the first time using powers to deploy troops to a member country. Burundi dismissed the announcement, saying no foreign force will get in without permission. Analysts say the deployment of an AU force may be the best viable solution, following the failure of the East African community to stop the escalating violence and foster mediation between the warring parties.
Everybody has deferred the responsibility of mediation to the East African community. And they've done that in written form, during press conferences, in a way that it's difficult to back out of. And now we're stuck with an organization, the East African Community, which has failed to fulfill the responsibility it's been given, which is not only to find a way to bring the actors at the negotiation table, but also to de-escalate violence.
The AU decision to send troops in will be the first time the organization will use powers to deploy troops to a member country against its will. In its statement about the deployment, the African Union stressed that it will not allow another genocide on African soil.
The Union has deployed different observing missions, a military observing mission, but at the same time, the mission of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights was in Burundi, investigating human rights violations, and it is expected to present its report very soon to the PSC. So I think these developments, I believe, may lead the AU in the right direction to respond to the crisis in Burundi at the moment.
Uganda said they will resume mediating peace talks for Burundi after violence that has pushed the Central African country close to civil war and led the AU to prepare for the imposition of a peacekeeping force.
Mali government has declared another state of emergency after what security sources say follows a series of threats from unnamed jihadist groups. In a press release on Monday, the Mali spokesperson said the government declared the state of emergency in order to allow the competent authorities better recognize and combat any plan that may threaten the safety of its people. Many armed fighters operate in Mali's vast northern desert, including some with links to Al-Qaeda and other secular groups drawn from the Tuareg community seeking independence for a region they call Azawad. Unknown jihadists attacked a luxury hotel in November, killing 20 people, including many foreigners, in the latest strike on the country's once stable southern capital, Bamako. Now let's take a short break on Network Africa. When we come back, the government of Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire and the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to resume voluntary repatriation of tens of thousands of Ivorian refugees. That's in a moment.